Tu Tien made noodle soup that morning the same way she always did when something was wrong, carefully, quietly, without asking questions. Jack had been at his desk since before sunrise. She had heard the chair. She had heard the keyboard. She had not gone in. "Are you hungry?" she called. "I'm hungry too, Tu Tien." His voice came from the other room. Too steady. The kind of steady that takes effort. She brought out the bowls. Garden tomatoes, bone broth, a few meatballs she had made from leftover meat, because nothing in this house got wasted. Jack sat down across from her and looked at the food for a moment before picking up his chopsticks. "You cook breakfast like this every morning," he said. "It's tiring for you. The noodles just need blanching. It's nothing." It was not nothing. They both knew that. But some mornings, the kindest thing two people can do is agree that it's nothing. Jack ate slowly. Outside, the sun was already climbing. It had rained the night before, and the soil in the cornfield would be soft, good for fertilizing, if they moved fast enough before the afternoon heat came. He had resolved everything. That was what he had said. And it was true, the way most hard truths are true completely, and also not quite. After breakfast, Jack went out to buy fertilizer. 2 bags, 600,000 dong. The child at the counter carried them to the motorbike without being asked. Jack paid, said thank you, drove home. The whole ride, his phone stayed in his pocket. There were 3 messages he had not answered. Not because he didn't know what to say, because he was still deciding whether saying it would make things better or only make them real. Tu Tien was already down at the cornfield when he got back. "I just came down," she said. She reached for one of the bags. He tried to take it back. She didn't let him. They worked side by side in the cloudy morning heat, Jack pouring, Tu Tien spreading, both of them moving in the easy rhythm of two people who have done this enough times that they no longer need to talk through it. Luckily, it rained yesterday. Tu Tien said, "The soil is softer, yes. The corn was looking stunted before. After this it should come back, yes." A pause. "The kind that isn't empty, Jack." Tu Tien kept working without looking up. "Have you resolved everything?" He poured the last of the second bag. He straightened up. He looked out over the corn rows, uneven, recovering. Not yet what they were supposed to be, but trying. "Yes," he said, "everything has been resolved." She looked at him then. "Just for a second." "Good," she said, and went back to work. She did not ask what it had cost him. That was one of the things about Tu Tien that Jack had never been able to explain to anyone. She always knew exactly how much to ask and how much to leave alone. They finished before the clouds broke. Walking back up to the house, Jack's shirt was soaked through. Tu Tien had dirt on both knees. The dog Key ran out to meet them at the gate and then immediately ran back inside, because dogs understand more than people give them credit for. "Go wash your hands first," Tu Tien said. "I'll make strawberry juice." Tu Tien. "Yes?" He stopped at the porch step. He looked at the farm, the cornfield below, the vegetable garden, the fish pond Tu Tien had been tending for months, the house that was not big but was entirely theirs. "Would you give up all of this," he said slowly, "to come live in the city with me?" Tu Tien turned around. She looked at him for a long moment. "I love you for who you are," she said, "not for what you give up." She tilted her head slightly. "But Jack, I don't think that's actually what you're asking me." He almost smiled. "No, it's not." "Then go wash your hands. We'll talk after the juice." She made the mulberry juice cold. With ice she had to chip herself because the freezer tray was half broken again. She set it in front of him without ceremony. He drank it in 3 long swallows. "It's good," he said. The sugar absorbed better this time. A silence. Comfortable. The cicadas outside were loud. Then Jack set the glass down. "Tu Tien, are you tired?" "No." "Why? Can you come back to my hometown with me, to see Mom?" Tu Tien went very still, not from surprise, from something that had been sitting in her chest for a while finally being said out loud. "I miss her too," she said quietly. "I didn't say anything because I thought your work was busy." "It was." He stood up. "It's less busy now." She packed in 20 minutes, one change of clothes for each of them, a bag of gifts she somehow already had ready, as if she had been quietly preparing for this trip without letting herself admit she was hoping for it. Jack called the driver while she packed. He stood on the porch and looked at the farm one more time. Vang the dog was lying near the gate, her belly round and low. "She's going to give birth soon," Tu Tien said, coming out with the bag. "I know. We'll be back tomorrow noon. Put a blanket in the cage before we go." He already had. The road took 2.5 hours. Tu Tien leaned on Jack's shoulder somewhere past the first hour and fell asleep. He didn't move. He sat with one hand loose on his knee and looked out the window at the rice fields going past, green, flat, familiar in the way of things you grew up with and forgot to notice until you're older and further away. His mother had been at his uncle's house for weeks now. She called when she wanted to talk and didn't call when she didn't, which meant she was fine, probably. But Jack had learned that probably fine and actually fine were two different things when it came to a woman who spent 40 years making sure other people didn't worry about her. The car stopped at the crossroads. They walked the rest of the way in. "This is where I grew up," Jack said. He said it simply, the way you say a fact that is also something much larger. "I lived here for a long time." Tu Tien looked at the village, the renovated houses, the old trees, the children playing in the late afternoon shadow. She did not say anything. She just walked beside him. They did not announce themselves. Jack had told his mother he was coming and then told the driver not to call ahead. Tu Tien had kept the secret for the whole 2.5 hours, which was its own kind of gift. Mrs. Lo was picking vegetables in the garden when they came through the gate. She looked up. She saw them. She stood very still for 1 second, the way a person stands still when something they had been quietly hoping for actually arrives, and they aren't sure yet if it's real. "Jack." "My son." Her voice came out soft and cracked at the edges. "You two are back. We missed you, Mom." She came forward fast, the way old mothers do when they stop caring about looking composed. She took Jack's face in both hands for a moment. Then she looked at Tu Tien. "Tu Tien." She took both of Tu Tien's hands. "You look thinner. Have you been eating?" "She cooks every meal from scratch," Jack said. "She's not thinner. I'm asking her, not you." Tu Tien laughed. "I'm eating well, Mom. Don't worry." Inside Mrs. Ly poured water. She asked about the farm, about the corn, about the fish. She asked about Let. Jack told her they had taken her home, that the doctor had checked her, that she was where she needed to be. Mrs. Lo nodded slowly. She had been worrying about that too, alone down here with no one to tell. "And Uncle Dung," Jack said. "Mom, you said he came down to visit." Mrs. Loe paused, just slightly, just enough. "Yes. He came on his motorbike." She kept her eyes on her water glass. "He brought smoked meat and fish. You know how he cooks. He rode 6 hours on a motorbike to bring you smoked meat. He was passing through, Mom." She looked up. Her eyes were calm, but her hand on the glass had gone still. "He said the house construction is starting," she said carefully. "He wanted to talk about the kitchen design. He said he loves to cook, so he wanted a good kitchen." A pause. "I told him to make the window face east." Jack sat with that for a moment. The east-facing window. He had put that in the design himself, but his mother had just said she told Dung, which meant she had known about the house before Jack thought she did, which meant she and Dung had been talking. More than once. He did not say any of this out loud. Tu Tien, sitting beside him, pressed her knee lightly against his under the table. She had heard it too. "Mom," Jack said finally, "are you happy here?" Mrs. Ly looked at her son. She looked at Tu Tien. She looked out at the garden, where the last of the afternoon light was still catching the leaves. "I am well," she said. "Your Uncle Dung makes sure of that." She said it simply, without decoration, without explanation, as if the sentence could hold the weight of everything underneath it, and she trusted them to understand. Tu Tien reached across the table and took Mrs. Ly's hand. Neither of them said anything. Outside, the village was going quiet for evening. Somewhere down the lane, Aunt Than's house had smoke rising from the kitchen dinner being made, family gathering the way family does in small villages when the sun goes down. Jack stood up. "Come on, Mom. Let's go to Aunt Than's house. I'll go later. You two go first. We'll all go together." They walked out into the village lane, Jack on one side, Tu Tien on the other, Mrs. Ly between them with her slow, certain step. The neighbors they passed said hello. Mrs. Ly introduced Tu Tien to each one, her voice carrying a quiet pride she probably didn't realize was showing. "Every time I come back," Jack said quietly to Tu Tien, "the village looks more different, but Mom looks the same. That's because she's waiting," Tu Tien said. "People who are waiting don't age, they just hold still." Jack looked at her. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise, you just never asked," he almost laughed. "The real kind." At the end of the lane, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Uncle Dung. "Jack, your mother told you about the kitchen window." Jack typed back, "She did." 3 dots appeared, blinked for a long time. Then, "There is something else I need to tell you. About the land, about who came to see me last week. Not by message in person. When you come back, come to the farm first. Before you go home." Jack read it twice. He put the phone back in his pocket. Beside him, his mother was laughing at something Tu Tien had said, a real laugh, small and surprised, the kind that comes out before you can decide whether to let it. He would ask tomorrow. Tonight was for the village lane, and Aunt Than's kitchen, and the koi pond his mother sat beside every afternoon drinking tea. Tonight was for the 2 women walking beside him, who had held everything together while he was busy trying to hold everything together. The message could wait until morning. But whoever had come to see Dung last week in person, not by message, was someone Jack did not yet know existed. And that kind of visit never meant good news.